And we're now going to join John Briggs, Alice and the Money Tree, with Caroline Stevens.
Welcome to a Stepping Stones awareness session. I'm with John Briggs today. He's written a book called Alice and the Money Tree. So, John, we met at an AV9 conference. It was about 3 months ago now. Welcome to Wiltshire. Welcome to the film studios. And now you know what we're up to.
It's astonishing. I've never been in a film studio before, and a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for coming, and I wanted to hear all about your book. As we discussed earlier,
Yes.
I'd been part of an all-party parliamentary group on financial education for young people.
Yes.
And books such as this would have been invaluable to have taken into schools to help the teachers talk to the children about saving and not going into debt. So, John, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to writing this fantastic book?
Well, heavens, I mustn't give my whole life story. I can only say that I only really discovered how the world worked about 10 years ago, when by accident somebody explained to me that money was issued as debt, and it came from nowhere at all, and it was a great conjuring trick. And
Well, you had your own two businesses, hadn't you?
I had.
You'd employed about 75 people between the two businesses.
Well, one business employed over 50, and perhaps the other one up to 20. And I retired a long time ago in when I was 53 years old, I think 1991, and lurked about ever since. And I was I can't believe I was over the age of 70 before I realised how money actually worked. And then I discovered that, for instance, John Maynard Keynes, who's wrote the book for everybody on economics, how it should be, and although I think he was a Conservative Member of Parliament, his policies are followed by the Labour Party and just about everybody everywhere. And he actually said that by our method of banking, which is called fractional reserve banking, governments secretly and unobserved confiscate the wealth of the people, the population, and only 1 in a million detect the theft. Now, this great man uses the word detect, and theft is clearly a crime.
Yeah.
So I struggled with this for a little while. I couldn't understand how a bank could provide me with money, which quite happily would go in payment for an object, and yet not actually loan it. Yet somebody finished up with the money. That was what on earth is happening? Now, it's a conjuring trick. Nobody understands it. It took me some while to pull it all to pieces and to understand it. And perhaps I shouldn't talk too much about the understanding of it, because it's in the book, and it's hard to describe a conjuring trick, and it is so simple.
So what did the banks do then? Because, I mean, I know that when I was doing their financial education work, we were being funded by a charity. It was mainly the Personal Finance Education Group.
Yes.
And they were being funded primarily by the banks and the building societies and the insurance companies to go into schools. And the concept was to have greater financial awareness for the kids. And of course, then I started realising that doing my own workshops, that I was doing budgeting for the 17, 18-year-olds because they were going to be soon leaving school and going off to university. So all these students, they all were given a job, an occupation. So they would stand there with their occupation, and the students actually had to choose which salary they felt would be the smallest and which would be the largest. And the students had to stand in a row with their job description. And it was interesting because we talk about banking, and we know that a lot of people make a lot of money from banking. But that masks the fact that in actual fact, when you go into the bank, you're actually on quite a as a banking clerk,
yeah.
you're on a very low salary. So it was interesting. It was a real eye-opener for the children, because the banking clerks were actually on the very lowest rungs, pretty much.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
You know, with the lawyers and the vets and the doctors on the other end.
Yes.
So they would have to budget, and they would have to say the average amount to pay into for accommodation and insurances. People had never thought they'd have to pay for insurances. No. You know, if they were away from home, whether they're working away from home or students, they would have to protect their possessions. All these things that nobody really ever talks to people about. And I just thought it's such a valuable lesson for people, for teachers to get involved in financial education. And the teachers would say, wow, we didn't even know that. So, but it's a two-edged sword, because you got these banks and insurance giants getting their logos into the schools, because once an account has been opened with a bank, you find that you don't tend to move from one bank to another. So, I mean, it's very lucrative from their perspective. Once you get the foot in the door, you've got your child. Chances are you've probably got that child for life.
Absolutely, yes.
But I realised that working on this all-party parliamentary group, that we were trying to educate the kids to understand this sort of thing, but the small print, you know, the government reports were coming out that in actual fact, the small print in the banking side, the insurance side, was getting so small and getting so complicated that there was just no way that this sort of, you know, them going in was never going to help those kids. So what do you say in your book?
Well, it goes a level above that, or behind that, shall I say. You have to go a scene behind. And it would be a wonderful thing if this book could get into real education about finance. Real education isn't anywhere. As Milton, the great economist said, only 1 in a million people understand the theft, and it's theft. The purpose of this book is to be an easy aid for people to understand it, and more than that, to be able to reveal the truth to their friends. The truth is that when you go to borrow £200,000 from a bank to buy your house, the bank writes a cheque and it gives you £200,000. You pay this money to the builder of your house, and then you spend the rest of your life paying back the £200,000 2 or 3 times over. Now, you're happy after 30 years and you've retired and you have a house, but the bank has got perhaps the value of 2 houses, and this is the truth that cannot penetrate people. It's really hard to take it on because it's so extraordinary. They don't actually loan a penny. What they do is create brand new money. Now, if they're charging interest and they haven't loaned anything, this has to be fraud. This is the crime that Maynard Keynes is speaking of. And the part of his quotation he neglected to reveal is governments confiscate the wealth of the people without the population detecting the theft. He neglected to say for whom they are taking the cash for. Who are they acting on behalf of?
Well, I guess they're shareholders.
The government are acting on behalf of the financial industry. And I have to.
Well, they lobby the government, don't they?
Well, they more than lobby the government. Something that I've only just recently discovered is that in both houses of Parliament, in the Lords and in the Commons, there is the Speaker, and next to the Speaker is a chair which is provided for. I think the correct name is reminder or some such phrase, and he is there to represent the City of London. What he does, I don't know. What he's supposed to, I don't know if nobody's ever heard of him. You've heard of the Speaker of the House of Commons. No one's ever heard of this man, but he is there. I'm not sure what his function is, but he is representing the City of London. And in the way that...
So what's the City of London? What's a guy representing the City of London doing next to the Speaker?
You ask me. I don't know. It's not published. It's not written anywhere. It might be, but if it is, I do not know. But can I say, I'm not saying this in a very clear way, but if you read the book, I've tried to write it in an easy narrative so that people can easily understand this fraud, this scam.
And is this is for both students,
yes,
school
for
students,
everybody,
and
yes.
adults?
Yeah, absolutely so. It's also for people who are awake, and there aren't so many, to help them persuade friends to learn the truth. And it's very important for people to learn the truth because there are so many horrible crimes in the world that you have made us aware of in your film studio. The extraordinary amount of people who die from cancer when there are cures, the ghastly child abuse that you've revealed, and I've seen them on your...
Well, I mean, people are going to have to... I mean, how are people going to say...
Well, if none of these crimes can happen, and if the supply of money, their oxygen of money is cut off, you need money to create these ghastly crimes. And the main target, I believe, to challenge, you challenge all of these crimes if we reveal the money fraud to the whole population. It's a very hard thing to do because the people who run the money fraud run all of the communication systems, and we only have word of mouth and people like you that are providing this sort of information on the internet. We really don't have the coverage. A newspaper dare not print this, will not. It's never mentioned anywhere. Nowhere. Nobody's ever heard of the term fractional reserve banking.
What is fractional reserve
fractional
banking?
Reserve banking?
For the benefit of everybody.
Okay, well, it's the term that's used by banks. Banks claim that only one person in 10 will ever go to the bank at one time to withdraw their money. So therefore, they can loan out 9/10 of all the money which is deposited with them. This is complete rubbish because everybody's bank account is being used up. Your bank account, my bank account, all the money comes into my bank every month is spent, and everybody's. So how on earth can you use it for more than one purpose or 9 more purposes? You can't. What they do is they pretend to bet. You go to the bank to borrow £200,000 to borrow the money to buy a house. They pretend to lend you the money. You believe they've lent you the money, but they haven't. What they've actually done is create brand new money. Now, the brand new money gets into circulation and it dilutes the other money which is already there, which is the cause of inflation. When I first went into a pub, a glass of beer was 7p in new money, 7p halfpenny. Now it's £4.50. And we're told to blame the greedy people who keep driving up the price of coal and want more money to be miners.
What about the tax?
Well, yeah. Surely tax. Well, most of the tax goes to pay a great chunk of everybody's tax goes to pay the interest on the money that the government borrow. But they don't, in the same way, borrow anything at all. The Treasury go to the Bank of England or to a central bank and say, we want to borrow umpty-dumpty trillions of pounds. The Bank of England write out a cheque for umpty-dumpty billions of pounds, but there's nothing in their checking account. The logic is that the cheque has value because it will represent the money which is on the IOU from the Treasury, which is based on the taxes which will come in. This is the logic they use with double entry bookkeeping. So huge amounts of money and interest are being hoovered out. It's a hard thing to explain. It's a conjuring trick. If you go to the circus and you see a woman cut in half, you know it's a trick. And the production of money is exactly such a trick, and it's a very closely hidden secret.
So we're looking at the International Bank of, what is it, the Bank of International Settlements?
Well, that's the bank of all the international banks. It's like a great web which controls the whole world and enslaves the whole world with this financial fraud. There's no other word for it. All of these people have got loads of money. They don't actually do anything. They don't make motor cars or sell people meals, but somehow they've got all the money.
Yep.
They have all the money, but they actually, frankly, they don't have a penny that they haven't stolen from us with trickery. And the proof of this is in 2008, when they hit the wall. I mean, we have to go cap in hand to the International Monetary Bank, and we always have to go to banks for money because we haven't got any money. We have to live in penury, and we have to cut our pensions and earn less and work for longer hours because we financially haven't got any money. But when the banks hit the wall in 2008, the only people who had the capability to stump up the cash and bail them out was us. Now that shows everything. They don't have any money. They just get it from us with trickery, with the system. It's difficult to explain, especially me. I feel a bit sort of nervous in the studio, but if you buy this book and read it, by the time you get to the end of it, I think you will. It's written in a very easy narrative, in stories and in verse. It's only 60 pages long, half of it is pictures, and I've tried to make it as
accessible to everybody, really.
Exactly, and simple to read and to interest them, because people like stories. They don't like people poking their, like I am with you, trying to explain something and to poke my finger in your chest and say.
Well, if they read a story, for people to consider, because you've got, the statistics are now 1 in 2 children by the age of 18 have actually gone into debt.
Yeah.
And of course, when they get the courage to go to university, the average debt is £40,000-50,000
right. Yeah.
After being away for 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
And it's become normalised now, because I know when I speak to students who are thinking of going to university or at university, and I talk about the debt, and it's so it's accepted, and they don't realise that this can affect their credit rating for years to come. And also, they'll say, oh, well, we don't have to pay it back until I earn so much. And it's like...
The truth is, with inflation, they don't have to pay until they earn £25,000 or £30,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But in 10 years' time, the basic wage will be that with inflation, with this money system that we're using, because the value of the currency is continually being devalued, with extra money not being borrowed, but being printed and being put into the available cash which is around, which just dilutes the other, the available cash which is around.
Have you looked at credit unions at all?
Not very much, no.
Because that's where the people lend back to the people.
Yes, that's good. Yes, I've heard that. We should do that. And also building societies. They conducted business, always did, in an honourable way. Me as an old boy.
Strange that they've become banks, haven't they?
Yes, they have. But there are 2 left, I believe. They will be much under pressure, I think, to change. Yeah. And they probably will eventually. Most people have to give in to the pressure of the people who own all the money. Can blackmail, can bribe anybody, they can control everybody, they control all of the media, from from Hollywood to the schools. They make sure that all channels of information, all of this information that we're speaking about here is suppressed, is not spoken anywhere. I looked at this debate where you were mentioned in the House of Commons, and I read it all. It was a great long debate about the subject, about how students need to be educated about finance and debt. And it's absolutely shocking and appalling that all of those members of Parliament all got up and stood on their hind legs, and not one of them had got a clue. He didn't understand that there wasn't really any debt. No. It was just fraud. And perhaps those that did wouldn't dare say it, because if they did, would they hang on to their seats for very much longer with the remembrancer sitting next to the Speaker? It's all heavily censored. There are a number of I've come to realise modern day heresies that you're not allowed to speak of. And usury is one of them. Usury used to be in all of the religions. It was always condemned. It was a sin and wicked, but now it's never mentioned anywhere. It's never spoken of.
But become slaves when you're indebted.
The whole world has become, globally, a huge tax debt farm.
Yeah.
The government is borrowing money which doesn't exist. It has to be paid back with real money.
By our children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the...
Yep.
I mean, that's why I was so... I just thought it was such a scandal as being members of the European Union, because I've been campaigning to get education,
yes.
all the kids to be educated,
yes.
to save and not go into
yes.
debt. And then when I went to a public meeting to hear about what the EU actually involved,
yes.
we were paying money back at an enormous rate to the EU, to unelected bureaucrats. For what reason?
Yeah.
To fund their gold-plated pensions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And their fancy buildings.
All in on the game.
Everything expenses paid.
Yeah.
And it just didn't seem right.
Yeah.
Because whatever anybody says, it's our children that are going to have to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's getting worse, and it's getting worse, and people are worse off. I've come to believe than they've ever been. Certainly when, I mean, I haven't really, if you extrapolate how many hours you have to work, how many years you have to work to buy a house, or even how many hours you have to work to buy a pint of beer. I've worked it out for beer, but I haven't worked it out for the other essentials in life.
Well, when I left school, you used to be able to borrow 3 times your salary.
Yeah. No, it's 10 times.
So pretty much, 10 times. So you're talking about more than 10 years
yes.
of employment.
Yes, yes.
Your best years of employment, probably, to actually pay back. And then, of course, your insurances, your stamp duty, and all those other things, incidentals.
Yes.
And then we've got to provide for our long-term care and our pensions.
Yes.
So it's, we're reaching a tipping point now when people must surely be waking up and thinking, well, actually, I can no longer sell or give part of my house away to my children because I need that money to pay for my long-term care. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who has been diagnosed with cancer, and their treatment will be paid by...
one thing I would like to... Look, while I'm describing in my muddled way what debt is, you've got to read the book and then you really understand it. Another one of the great implications is that because the governments have to, we, with our taxes, have to pay back more than we borrow, because that's what you do, you have to pay back with interest. It means that, to use the American phrase, it's a dilemma. You're between a rock and a hard place. You have to grow the economy, which is why every 10th word or 50th word that a politician utters is growth, whether they are, whatever their stripe, whether they're a Labour, Conservative, or whatever they are. They keep saying we must have growth. Growth is down by 2%. You don't have to have growth. The only reason you have to have growth is because you have to pay back more money than you've borrowed. The alternative is you have to cut your pensions, work for longer hours, and cut your wages. Because of this usury system, where we have to pay back more than we borrow, which is totally unnecessary, the government can... Money is just a token to represent real things of value. It's just a token declared value by the state. The government can supply these tokens, and they have done. The Bradbury pound worked very, very well in 1914 when they thought the economy was going to crash because we got involved in a war. And these systems have been used throughout history.
Of course, the New Chartist movement has got the Bradbury pound as one of their items on their agenda.
Yes, the Treasury could issue these, could spend the money into circulation, pay for the NHS and the army and all of the projects that they have to. They don't have to borrow it and pay these tokens back at interest and give these tokens back. They could pay those into the economy. Then this money would finish up, descend into the banking system, and it can be if the economy expands, they can put more money tokens in because the money tokens just represent the value of the economy. Or if the economy shrinks in size, they can, with taxation, withdraw some of the money from circulation to keep inflation parked flat. And if they did this, my pint of beer, which was 8p in 1963, would still be 8p now in 2028.
Well, there's a thought.
Yeah. So,
okay, John, so what would you like to say to the people at home who are listening today?
I would like to say to the people who understand what I'm talking about, although it seems to me I'm speaking in a very garbled way because I'm not very used to doing this, if they buy this book, I think they will find, my hope is that they will find it entertaining and they can read it easily and simply. I've made it, compressed it as much as I can.
And it'll probably give them a different perspective on the whole situation.
They will see it slightly differently. But mainly, I'm hoping it's going to be an aid to help them wake their friends up, because it is the problem. It is so hard once people's mindsets are set. It's like a bad habit you've got in your head. You believe what you've always been told and you've learned. And this, what we're speaking about now, is so extraordinary to most people. They just can't take it in. It's such an extraordinary fraud. The human mind can't receive it. So it would be a wonderful thing if this book could arrive in all of the school libraries all over the kingdom.
Wouldn't it just?
Well, I think there might be. I'm not sure if the authorities would ever allow the truth to emerge.
Well, of course, a lot of the schools get a lot of funding from the EU in the back door, so they might not be too happy that this was going into their libraries. But anyway, John, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody at home. And I hope this has given you some food for thought, that our children need to be educated about our banking system. This book will hopefully provide a springboard to that education, and hopefully they won't go into debt. Thank you for listening. Welcome and good night.